This video will provide a overview of the modular scheduling philosophy and structure that Monett High School is planning to move to in 2014-2015. First issue that we need to address is what is the problem with our current schedule? Why would we be looking to change? There are about 4 reasons that we want to look at. One is how our current schedule, being an 8-period day of 45 minutes, really limits students' course selection because of conflicts. If students are enrolled in 2 courses that meet at the same time, or would like 2 courses that meet at the same time, they have to choose between those 2 courses and may not get all the courses that they want. Another issue with our current schedule is that students do not have access to teachers when they need help or when they would like to extend their learning with some enrichment. Only access to our teachers is before and after school because of both student schedule and teacher schedule, and our student schedules, especially after school, are becoming more and more busy with family issues, with work, and with extracurricular activities. Third issue is all courses, regardless of their instructional need, are structured the same. I want you to think about a ceramics course where it's very important for students to have time to shape and mold that clay into the project that they want. On our current schedule, they have to set up, work on, and clean up all within 45 minutes every day. If we could change the structure of that course to maybe meet fewer times a week, but meet for a more extended time whenever they are meeting, that would actually improve their ability to work on those projects. And finally, the fourth one is one I've mentioned a little bit before, but in our current schedule we have very little chance for students to get remediation or enrichment because of the schedule structure and the fact that every minute of their day is managed and in class as assigned. So why a modular schedule? Why does a mod schedule fix some of those issues? First, with intervention. A mod schedule will allow students to have access to teachers during the school day. Every student will have resource time in their schedule, and every teacher will have resource time in their schedule, so that students will have access to teachers for additional help and enrichment during the day. A modular schedule is very flexible. It allows us to structure courses according to their instructional need, so every course may be designed a little bit differently. Modular scheduling is research-based in that it satisfies the research that says learning should occur both inside and outside the classroom. Currently, because of just what goes on in our society and our culture, not just at Monett but everywhere, most of our teachers try to structure so that all activities and learning can be done in the classroom because it's very difficult to ensure that there are quality learning opportunities outside of the classroom. A modular schedule allows us to do both of those things within the school day. The other thing about a modular schedule is it presents a great deal of variety for the students, and that prevents stagnation and boredom, which most students say is an issue with their schooling, especially boredom. A modular schedule is also student-centered. One of the things we'll talk about is that it encourages student ownership and responsibility, and that it will create opportunities for students to learn time management and prioritization skills. And the bottom line is a modular schedule creates a use of time that serves students instead of students just serving the time that is scheduled at school, trying to create that ownership and use time and space differently so that it meets student needs. So what are the philosophies behind a modular schedule? The things that you need to consider before we look at some sample schedules would be that rather than every day repeating itself in a mod schedule, every 5 days repeats itself. So you can't think that the same thing is going to happen every day, but over the course of 5 days the same things will happen. Courses will be designed differently to deliver efficient and effective instruction. I mentioned the ceramics course earlier. Instead of meeting 5 days a week for 45 minutes, what's likely to happen for a ceramics course is it will only meet 2 days a week, but it's going to meet for 100 minutes at a time, so students have an extended period of time twice a week to really work on that project in clay. The other thing to think about is lab courses, biology, chemistry, physics. Those types of courses have a very limited opportunity to do lab work in 45 minutes. Many of those teachers and departments have chosen to extend that lab time so that there's one lab time a week that will be at least 75 minutes in duration. In a mod schedule, students will have access to their teachers during school hours. We'll see that very, very clearly whenever we do some sample schedules. Finally, students do have choice during their resource time. They can choose where they spend that time, they can prioritize what they're working on, and they manage that time themselves. That prioritization and time management skills, those are critical to success in a career and in a job beyond high school, but we do very little to develop those skills while students are in high school. Modular scheduling will help us do that. Some terminology that you'll hear me use. Large group is a large lecture style class, 50 or more students. I think college lecture. This can be used for delivery of information, for guest speakers, for showing videos to large numbers, or for assessment of a large group of students. Class group is the way a course would be traditionally set up. For, let's say, an English course, that'd be 25 to 30 students. For a choir course, that may be up to 75 students. So that is just how courses have been traditionally designed. A small group would be a group of 10 to 15 students that would meet with the teacher for discussion of content. We'll talk about that more specifically as we see a schedule, but it's this discussion where we're working very hard to engage students in a conversation about content that has some real possibilities for cementing learning for students. A flipped section, which will be available in a few courses, not in many, is where the content is delivered via video. The teacher would create a 10 to 15 minute video with the examples and the content that would normally be delivered face to face with students. Student will have a time to watch that during the school day, and then we'll have some follow up with that either in an online discussion or in a face to face discussion with teachers. Finally, resource time. This is the most important component of mod scheduling. It is time when a student is not in class, and they will be able to be in a resource center of their choice to work on academic work during that time. So again, resource time is the real key to mod scheduling. Let's look at our template for what our 5-day period will be structured like. You'll notice in the columns there, or down the left side, that there are 17 periods listed, each of 30 minutes with the exception of period 1, each of 25 minutes with the exception of period 1, which is 30 minutes. Those are called mods. Now, that's not to say students will be changing classes 16 times and have 17 different locations a day, but it is a structure that allows us to create courses of different lengths. Courses could be 25, 50, 75, or 100 minutes and may or may not meet every day. One of those 17 mods will be a student's lunch period, and that could vary from day to day, anywhere between mods 8 and 12. You'll notice that time can be made very flexible to meet learning needs. You will also notice across the top that rather than saying Monday through Friday, it says A day through E day. That is very intentional in that we have many 4-day weeks, many vacations, snow days come into play, and we think it's very important that students have that continuous 5-day instructional cycle. Just as an example, in looking at the 14-15 school year calendar, school would be in session 32 Mondays, 36 Tuesdays, 38 Wednesdays, 38 Thursdays, and only 30 Fridays. So you can see a disparity if we were to use a Monday through Friday schedule. If we use this rotational schedule where students come back to school on the next day in the cycle, no matter where that break occurred, we'll get a continuous cycle of all 5 instructional days, and each day will meet approximately 35 times throughout the course of the year. Very, very important concept to us that cycle of instruction is continuous over the 5 days. What we're going to do next is actually build in a freshman schedule course by course, and we'll talk about those courses and that structure as they pop in. So here's a sample freshman schedule, and the first course we'll populate is English 1. You'll notice that it's going to meet 4 days a week, and it will meet for 50 minutes each of those days. That's 200 minutes of instruction a week. Currently in our schedules, English 1 students have 225 minutes in class. The expectation will be that they spend some of their resource time with the English teacher working individually or in small groups to meet that number of minutes expectation. So again, you also notice it's not the same time on the days that it's scheduled. That is a possibility that creates the flexibility of a modular schedule. It is possible when you compare the student makeup of the section on A day to the student makeup of the section on B day, there could be some differences because of the other courses that students are taking. It will be the same teacher on each of those days, but could be a little bit different mix of students as needed so that students can fit everything into their schedule. Teachers will keep the same pace in each of those sections. Next, let's populate U.S. history. U.S. history teachers have chosen to meet 5 days a week for 50 minutes. Very traditional class setup. The only difference you'll see here to what you would experience in a regular school day, an 8-period school day, is that the classes are not at the same time every day. But again, a 50-minute traditional class setup for U.S. history. Same thing for Algebra 1. Algebra 1 will meet 5 days a week for 50 minutes, so those students will have a very traditional setup, other than they may not meet at the same time every day. Also, with this particular time, you see an advisory pop in twice a week. Those are in that light green color. Every freshman will have a freshman advisor, a faculty member, and about 20 to 25 students in that advisory class, and they will meet for 50 minutes twice a week just to work on transition to high school items and some other skills, time management, goal setting, things like that related to success in high school. What's unique about this approach that we'll be able to do that we presently cannot do is those students will keep that same advisory teacher for their sophomore, junior, and senior year. During those 3 years, the advisory will only meet once a week for 50 minutes rather than twice a week. Currently our freshmen have academy hour every day of the week, but we're going to reduce that to 2 days because of all the resource time that they'll have. Physical science is the most unique freshman course in the core areas, so let's talk about it for a little bit. It is populated in the schedule, and you can see late in A day there's physical science large group. That will be a group of probably 75 or so freshmen, 60 to 75, in a single location for direct instruction. Now understand there will be more than one teacher in that large group. There will be one teacher delivering the instruction and another teacher or two monitoring behavior and performing classroom management type activities. But you have to think college lecture style, and that would probably be the only course that freshmen would experience a large group in. If you notice, B Day and D Day appear to be just typical physical science classes, 50 minutes, probably 25 students or so in those classes, very traditional setup. You can see on C Day in the morning, this particular student would have a 75-minute science lab. That science lab allows for students to actually begin and complete any lab activities all in one setting rather than spreading it over 2 days and really breaking up that learning. So that extended lab time is very important. And then you see on E Day in Mod 12, this particular student would have physical science small group. That would be taking about 10 to 15 students, those 10 to 15 students meeting in a very small group setting with a teacher to kind of cement the learning from that 5-day cycle. Would have discussions, the teacher would be able to answer questions. We feel like that small group setting where there's only a maximum of 15 students will promote more discussion and take away barriers to students feeling like they can contribute to that discussion. Populate the rest of their schedule with their final 3 courses, Spanish 1, Cardio, Fitness, and Art and Design. And you can see those are, for the most part, fairly traditional. Spanish does have a small group on E Day as well that will provide, for some of that cementing of learning for the week. This would be the student's full academic coursework schedule. You see there are still a lot of open spaces in that schedule. Those spaces are where the resource time and lunch will go. You can see this particular student with lunch will have it at 2 different times depending on the day, either 12:15 or 11:25, but they have a full 25 minutes for lunch. The orange periods are marked resource. Those are times when that student will be in a resource center. We'll have 5 resource centers officially. That will be math, science, social studies, English, and just the library as a general resource area. When a student has this resource time, they will report to one of those resource areas to check in, and they will spend that time working on academic work. If they need help in math, they would likely report to the Math Resource Center. There will be a math teacher there to help them with whatever they're struggling with in math. So there are all kinds of options and different things for a student to be able to do during that time, but this is the most valuable piece of modular scheduling. The way it works into the schedule is this is allowing that student-teacher contact during the school day and allowing for tutoring and enrichment to occur during the school day. You notice this freshman student would have 13 resource periods throughout the week, so that's a little over 3 hours of time built into their schedule to work on class assignments and to get additional help from teachers. We think that's very powerful for our students. Let's look at a sample junior schedule now, but instead of course by course, let's go day by day so that you see it in a little different format. This particular junior is enrolled in 7 courses, and their A day or first day of the cycle, you can see 2 large groups on there, English 3 large group and American Government large group. Again, those will be approximately 75 students in one location with multiple teachers doing lecture-style activities. But if you look at this schedule from top to bottom, it appears that there are 8 50-minute periods with a lunch, which is a very traditional feeling day for that student. The only real change are the large groups and the 2 resource times. But that student would go to all those classes and it would be a very traditional feel. When we go to B day now, you can see really the same sets of classes, although sociology has now been added, 5th and 6th mod. It did not meet on A day, but will on B day. And you can see chemistry is in a large group on B day. Only 1 resource time, but still 8 50-minute segments of time plus lunch for that particular student. C day, again, appears to be fairly traditional. Sociology just has a small group in the morning rather than a regular group, and that extends that resource time to 75 minutes that the student has to work. The student on C day has a fairly significant amount of resource time, so you would expect them to get a lot of work done outside the classroom on C day. When we go to D day, again, fairly traditional, other than an English 3 small group now. But if you look at D-Day by itself, a lot of 50-minute classes as a student would typically have during a traditionally scheduled day. E-Day shows quite a bit different schedule. You see first advisory in there. This particular junior would have advisory with a teacher, 3rd and 4th mod on E-Day. English 3 is in small group that day. Sociology is in small group that day. Algebra 2 is in large group at the end of the 5-day cycle, and that is probably more to do with assessment than it is to do with instruction. Teachers can give that way large groups of students in assessment all at the same time. You also see in the afternoon a chemistry lab, again extended for 75 minutes to allow that student or those students to complete activities rather than spread them over 2 days. You will notice this particular student has 21 resource periods as compared to the freshman that had 13. We think as a student gets older, they have more opportunity to be responsible, and their coursework is probably going to require more outside of class work. So during that resource time, those students will have more work to work on. Another option for this student, you notice they're only enrolled in 7 courses. If this student were to decide, I really don't need 21 resource periods, I want to take an 8th course, we will allow them to take an 8th course and gain more academic credit in an elective area or an area of their choice rather than have those resource times or that number of resource times. So it gives students really great flexibility in what they are able to enroll in. Now, students will be enrolled in a minimum of 7 courses. That would be our expectation for all students. 8 would be the maximum initially. As we develop this schedule and we continue to work on it year after year, we may have the availability to allow students to take a 9th or a 10th course even if it will fit into their schedule. Let's look now at a junior schedule that is a student that goes to the Technical Center, Scott Regional Technology Center, to take a 3-hour program there. I'm not going to go through and build the entire schedule for you, but there you can see big blocks each afternoon of construction technology. The time frame may vary just a little bit, but you get the concept here that those students will have that particular program same time every day to allow for them to get the extended learning time that they need. A couple other things you notice, this student only has 7 resource periods per week. That's because they have the construction technology course plus 5 other courses. So they're taking what would be 8 credits, and that limits their resource time. You see some flipped instruction within intermediate algebra in the light blue, but what you'll notice is every day that they have a flipped video that they watch, and that would be watched in a resource center, a place of their choosing. They follow that up later in the day with a small group to discuss what was shown in the video and have that question and answer time with the teacher. So we're building all that into the school day. Again, you notice lab section, some small group time, some large group time. So this student has a wide variety of different instructional types and section types that they will meet during the week. I do want to point out this red rectangle here that is a conflict. We mentioned starting out the presentation that in a traditionally scheduled scheduled day, when a conflict occurs, the student has to make a choice between the courses. In a modular schedule, when conflicts occur, many times they will simply be an overlap of one 25-minute period, as is the case here between Lifetime Sports and English 3. So we have multiple ways to deal with this conflict. It could be that the student is expected to leave Lifetime Sports early on that day and report to English 3 on time because English 3 is a core area course. Or it could be that they alternate weeks, that one week they stay in Lifetime Sports, the next week they go to English 3. There could be a myriad of ways that we handle that conflict time, but the biggest advantage is two things. One, student learns how to manage conflict and how to manage having to be in two places at one time on their schedule. The second part is the student is still able to take both of those courses and earn those credits. They don't have to make a choice between those courses as they do in a traditional schedule. Now, in a modular schedule, what we will allow students to do, if the student says, you know, I really do not want that conflict, I want to have a conflict-free schedule, we will allow that to happen. We'll let them choose which one of those courses they would want to give up and put a different course in its place in order to create a conflict-free schedule. The schools that we visited regarding mod scheduling indicated that around 25% of their students have a conflict in their schedule, but there are some students that go through 4 years and never experience a conflict. So we do have all kinds of options available regarding that 25-minute overlap that we don't have now because, again, a conflict right now means the student has to choose between those two courses. Now let's look at a concept called backscheduling. Let's say we're back to this freshman student's schedule, and let's say that this student is really struggling in Algebra 1, but is not using their time wisely and coming to the Math Resource Center for help. Their math teacher looks at the student schedule and the teacher's schedule and says, look, we've got this 50-minute period on D-Day that both of us are in resource time. So the teacher can informally say, student, I want you to report to me during this resource time. That's informal backscheduling. Student chooses still not to come, we can make it a more formal process and we can actually assign the student to math resource with that specific teacher during that specific time, and that's where they must report for attendance. They must report there and until they're caught up, until the teacher says, okay, I feel like you're caught up now, we can resume, you can resume your choice during that time of where to spend your resource time. But this concept of backscheduling is very critical to helping students that are struggling and teaching them how to properly use their time to make sure that they stay caught up in all areas. Again, it can be formal or informal, and the length and duration of that backscheduling will occur will vary depending on student performance in that particular course. Let's look at a sample teacher schedule. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but this just to illustrate what a teacher's week may be made up of. This particular teacher teaches 4 classes of biology and 2 of anatomy and physiology. So you see, again, the wide variety of small groups and labs and large groups and different things that would make up a teacher's schedule. You also see resource times on there. This particular teacher would have 22 resource mods where this teacher is in the Science Resource Center available to help students with questions and help tutor or provide enrichment to those students. You also see that the teacher does have 10 mods for planning. That is state required that a teacher has 250 minutes of planning per week, so that is provided, but you will notice that may not mean 2 mods every day. On B day and C day, this particular teacher has 3 mods of planning, but on D day, they have no built-in planning time, but a significant amount of time in the resource center. Also, we will allow teachers to eat lunch on this schedule, so you can see that the teacher has lunch, but it's at 3 different times throughout the week. So again, just show you that to show how the teacher schedule may work to allow that resource time to work with students as well. Let's talk specifically about resource time and the guidelines and what we are thinking about. Students are going to have to check in at a resource center, but it will be of their choice. One of our struggles right now is determining how we're going to take attendance during that system. We have to take attendance and account for students, as our state funding is based on minutes of student attendance. So we need to make sure every minute a student is attendance, we have that location and we're able to report that to the state. So that the real struggle is, since there's 5 different locations to which they can check in, how do we gather that data in a timely manner and know where the students are? We're putting together a student team to develop a program or application for either the MacBook or a mobile device, whereby students would take their student ID that has a barcode or QR code on it and scan into that to a location, and it would capture the time they scanned in and the location which they scanned, and then we would be able to import that into our student management system for attendance purposes. Still working on that, but we're going to put students in charge of helping us solve that issue. Students during resource time should be working on something academic related. That could be as simple as reading for pleasure if all their homework is done, but we do expect them to be working on something academic related of their choice. At this point, we're probably looking at them only transferring resource centers during mod changes. So if a student chooses to go to the math resource center, they would be there for that 25 minutes, and then if they had more resource time at the end of that 25 minutes, they could transfer to a different resource center so that they can get help on another topic. Understand, it's important to understand that just because a student's in the math resource center doesn't mean they have to be working on math. The resource centers can be used just as quiet study places for students to sit and study on anything. But there will be teachers available for the specific subject that's in that resource center. So a student could go to the math resource center and work on a social studies project. When they get stumped then at that 25-minute period, they can transfer to the social studies resource center to get help from a social studies teacher. One of the things we're concerned about is training students in how to use this system. So we will use a process that we will call stamping in for all students initially. What a stamping in process means is over the first 2 to 3 months of school, all students this first year will carry a paper copy of their schedule with them on a grid that will show their resource times. When they report to a resource room, the teacher that's monitoring that will simply have to place a stamp, a rubber stamp that says math, science, whatever, onto that paper, and the student keeps that paper for the entire week. When they have their advisory time, the advisory teacher will look at that schedule and see where the student has spent their resource time. That will allow us to identify if students are not using the resource centers that they need to for additional help. It'll allow us to see if they're just gravitating to a single resource center and don't understand what resources we have available. The goal through this is to help students understand what resources are available and to help them prioritize how to spend their time. Teachers very well could say to a student, look, you're stamping into the library every resource time that you have. When you come back next week, I want to see at least one stamp from every resource center just so I know that you've visited them, know where they're located, and know what resources are available in that particular center. After we feel like students have an idea and are trained on how to use that time, we'll probably discontinue the stamping in process so that we can focus on some other things during that advisory time. Please understand also we will have at least one staff member monitoring hallways at all times. Our PE teachers have elected to not have resource time. They don't feel like there's as strong a need in physical education to provide tutoring to students. So instead of resource time for physical education, they will actually be hallway monitors and help monitor student behavior and student movement during that time. We are considering a parent volunteer program to help with monitoring our exits and things like that during the school day. Parents, you can look for more information to come on that and more requests for maybe volunteers and some organizational type meetings in the near future. So that's just trying to invite parents into our building to see how things are going, but to also give them a limited scope of responsibilities to help us out in monitoring student movement during resource time. Facility plans. I know many are going, your building wasn't built for this. Where are you going to house 75 to 90 students for large group? How are these resource centers going to be structured? So I've got some tentative facility plans, still working with architects to determine exactly how this may look. If you're familiar with our building, you'll recognize these plans. If you're not familiar with our building, I'll try to walk you through those. Our building has basically two academic wings where all of our classrooms other than physical education are held. So this is the east wing of the school. What you'll notice is the classroom shaded in orange will be for math, for blue will be for social studies, yellow special education, purple are small group rooms and special education rooms we'll talk about a little bit, and others just have their particular program written in there, those that are not colored at all. Our fine arts will have specific areas for those fine arts. Let's talk about the Math Resource Center. To create this Resource Center, we'll remove a wall between room 121 and 122, so it's a double-sized classroom. All math teachers will be housed there. That's where their home base will be, and there will be room for probably in the neighborhood of 50 students to be in there working at any one time. Math teachers then will not have their own classroom. All of our math teachers will share rooms 123, 124A, and 124B for classroom instruction. Same thing will happen with social studies. We'll remove a wall between room 152 and 153 to create their resource center, and then they will use rooms 151, 125, and 145 for instruction. Special education teachers will be housed in room 154, where that'll be the Special Education Resource Center, and they will also use room 158 and the kitchen attached to room 158 for transition planning and for other special education classes. Room 156 and 157 are smaller classrooms, so our thought right now is to make those small group rooms so that we're making maximum utilization of our space, but they would also be available during non-small group times for special education to teachers to use as well. Looking at the west wing of our building, the classrooms shaded in purple are for English and world languages, Spanish and French. The English teachers will all be housed in room 229 and 230, again removing a single wall to create really a 2.5 classroom size space as we have more English staff, and that's an area that more students will likely need help in, whether it's with writing or just with their English work in general. So that's where that English Resource Center will be, and then all of, again, the English and world languages will be taught in rooms 224 through 228. Room 223 will be reserved for our English language learners. Room 217 will be for our Read 180 program for struggling readers. They need a specific space structured specifically for that program. You see all of the green rooms will be science classrooms and labs. There is an error on this particular setup where we've got the Science Resource Center marked in 206, 207. Excuse me, is not going to be possible due to some architectural issues. So 206 and 207 will be science classrooms, and we're exploring the possibility of rooms 211 and 212 serving as the Science Resource Center, removing the wall between those two. You also see the library shaded in yellow as a general resource center for student use during resource time. I'll draw your attention to the orange shading in room 219 and 220. That's currently our technology department. We're researching right now, moving all of our technology staff and all the servers and things like that to the separate building that you see above the ELL room. That's the old agriculture building, making that our technology building where they would be housed, and then converting room 219 and 220 into a fan-shaped amphitheater-style lecture hall that could potentially house 90 to 100 students. What we like about this plan is that it keeps students in the building, and we can keep the doorways at the end of the west wing closed and locked at all times for student safety and security. If we are unable to use room 219 and 220 as large group area, we will use some area out in the old agriculture building that's labeled 240. Remove some walls, reconfigure that space just a little bit to create a large group area there. The disadvantage is we would not be able to have the amphitheater style, as that is a fixed ceiling height of about 8 to 9 feet. So there'd be no way to elevate the student seating so that they can see the teacher clearly. Whereas in 219 and 220, room 220 has about a 15-foot high ceiling, so we're able to elevate students and put a tiered viewing area in 219 and 220. So the facility plan is still working with architects on that issue, but we believe all these modifications can be made in time for an August 2014 rollout. Some transitional items. As we transition to this, we know students are going to need some help, are going to need to understand where things are located because the building's been remodeled, so to speak. So day one of the 2014-15 school year will likely just be an orientation day where we have specific orientation activities planned for all of our students that they would go through during that school day to orient them to the building and to modular scheduling. Then day two would become our first official day of classes. But all students would be expected to attend on day one to go through the orientation items. We're also going to provide teachers with opportunities over the summer to prepare for classes next fall, as they need some additional time with the different structure of classes in order to be ready to teach when we go back to school in August. Timelines. The master schedule development will begin second week of March and be complete by May 1, so the student schedules may be entered May 1 through June. We will have that. We mentioned the attendance issue with Resource Center. Our goal is to have that attendance solution in place by April 15th so that we can test it during the remainder, the back end of this year to make sure that it's going to work. And we will work with architects and maintenance to make facility modifications from now through the summer. Again, going back to the beginning, what are our purposes for mod scheduling? We believe we need to provide remediation and enrichment during the school day, and this schedule allows us to do that. We need to prepare students for life after high school by teaching them time management prioritization skills. Again, this schedule allows us to do that. We need to promote collaboration among students and teachers. Currently, it's very traditional, very teacher-centric. We want it to become more collaborative so that students and teachers spend time working together either in remediation or in enrichment-type activities. And we want to permit student ownership of their own education by giving them some choice during resource time. And then as this schedule develops over the course of the next few years, may be able to work in some opportunities for students to really do explorations of things that they're interested in for college and careers during those resource times. Again, closing thoughts. At Monett High School, we're always looking to do what is best for our kids. We believe this is an exciting transition that really does meet student needs and prepares them for 21st century careers. Understand that the transition is going to have logistical bumps. We're going to have the best plan in place that we can, but it is not going to be perfect when we begin this. So there will be some transitional bumps, but we are committed to this schedule for at least a period of 5 to 7 years so that we can ensure that we, one, have ironed those bumps out, and then we can look and see the impact it's having on students and their preparation for life. Student learning is going to continue and it's going to actually improve with this type of schedule. With the support we're able to provide through resource times, we believe that more students will be able to meet the expectations that we have for them academically. Again, students are going to be taught time management and prioritization skills, which is important, and we want Monett High School to continue to be a leader both in our state and in the nation in preparing students for their future. We have to keep our focus on what students need, as many of the careers that they will spend their lives doing have not been invented yet because of the rapid pace at which technology is changing the world of work, whether that be the finance industry or an industrial industry. Many of the jobs that these students will occupy have not been invented yet, so we have to prepare students for all eventualities in that case. Here is some contact information. If you would like, you can follow us on Twitter at Monett High. We have a Facebook page as well that puts out information. You're welcome to email me at the email address listed there if you have questions or comments or would like to get further information about modular scheduling at Monett High School. Thank you for taking the time to view this video, and we look forward to an exciting 2014-2015 school year at Monett High School.